Infidelity makes you feel that you're not, in fact, the chosen one, that you're one of the ordinary. Someone got so close to you, they learned things about you, and then they didn't like what they saw, and so they left. They heard you, they came to know about you, and then they didn't like the taste of it. So they went to someone else who can be better. This may not truly be the case, but this is how your mind looks at it.
Pour the Heart Out. Episode 3, Cheating.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Pour the Heart Out. You're with your host Isha, and I once again have with me Praneeth Kaur, who's a counseling psychologist and a relationship expert. Today we're talking about a theme that has been really requested for. We're talking about cheating today. So my first question to you, Praneeth, is that I do feel that there is a lot of ambiguity on understanding what is cheating. So can you just clear the air? What is really cheating? What kind of behavior falls under cheating?
Sure. So I've noticed that there is a lot of confusion around what really cheating is. I mean, there are some very obvious behaviors that are considered as cheating if you're sleeping around with someone else other than your partner, if you're emotionally getting involved with someone other than your partner. But, I've seen that over the period of time, relationships have evolved in a way, and the whole digital world has taken over in a way that there is a definite expansion in the definition of what really would be considered as cheating. So earlier, having sex with another person was cheating, and now sexting someone is also cheating. While you're dating someone and you're on a dating app, that's also considered cheating. If you're watching pornography, that's considered as cheating. If you're casually flirting with a colleague, that is also considered as cheating. So the definition is just getting expanded, and I don't think that there is a universal sort of definition to it. And so whenever I talk about cheating, I feel that we can really break it down to three things. First one being that when there is a secretive relationship involved, which means that if there is any relationship that you're keeping away from your partner, that's one of the signs. Second is when there is an emotional connection involved with, again, a person outside of who your partner is. So it's secretive. There is some sort of an emotional connection involved. Thirdly, sexual imagination or sexual inclination. Now, inclination being the key word here. Now, we think until and unless we've not actually went ahead and slept with the person, or we've not actually acted on our thoughts, it's not cheating. But that's the thing. There is Esther Perel, a very famous, wonderful relationship expert, and she says that it's really your imagination that's responsible for love and not the other person. A lot of research now talks about how even imagining giving someone a kiss is equated to making love to someone multiple times. You see? So when a person has entered in your imagination of sexuality, that's how you desire your partner the most. So your imagination and a person who enters in that imagination plays a very strong role in shaping your feelings towards that person. There was a research that happened where couples across the world were asked, when is it that you desire your partner the most? And the one of the most popular answers was that when my partner is away, when they're out, they're away from me, and I can't have them, is when I desire them the most. And it's in my imagination where I then find them, and I can be as romantic and as involved and as desirable and as desired in my imagination with my partner. And because of that imagination, when my partner returns to me, it leads to a different kind of excitement and brings about a different kind of an element in the relationship. So, if you've started to fancy another person in that regard, that also comes under the category of infidelity. So, secretive relationship, emotional connection, and sexual alchemy, sexual imagination.
And moving forward, I want to understand, do you think there are some factors involved? I mean, one, definitely you mentioned imagination, but imagination in itself can have so many factors involved. So what are some of the factors involved that lead a person to cheat on someone?
A very popular belief is that if your partner is cheating on you, then there is something wrong with you or there's something wrong in the relationship. A very popular belief that has been going on since ages, and a lot of these oldies say that for married couples as well. That, if you find out that your partner has cheated on you, or if, let's say, your man has cheated on you, you being the wife, you're going to be told that if only you were giving your partner everything, they wouldn't have gone out. That if you're getting everything at home, why would you want to go out? Which is basically, in a way, assuming that a relationship can be perfect or it has to be perfect in order for a person to not cheat. But even if we look at this notion, can you really have everything at home? Would you not want to go out for anything else? Now, this is not to say or justify cheating, but this is to understand that every relationship is imperfect and is flawed in its own sense. And it does not say anything about any of the two people as much as it says about the relationship equation that you're sharing with your partner that leads to cheating. So, a person who's cheated, what goes on in their mind is that, I very strongly believe that when you cheat, you're not looking for another person as much as you're looking for another self, a part of yourself that you couldn't find while you were in this relationship. One of my clients married one child, tells me that I've always been the driven woman. I've always been the woman who's done it, who does it all, who's responsible, who's on point, who's perfect, who has everything together. And here I am feeling so suffocated in my marriage for a while now, feeling as if I'm very confined. And I go to this MNC every day and I work there and I feel so empowered, and yet I feel something is missing. My husband and my child adores me, and yet I feel something is missing. And there is my colleague who's just the opposite of who I am. I am this really organized, very put together, very perfect sort of a person. And there he is coming to an MNC on his bike, just so carefree in life and still so comfortable in his skin, and he is just the kind that I hate, she says. And yet she ended up involving with him outside of her marriage. And she said the word that she kept using, and she actually talks about her experience online as well, and very openly talks about it after having to recover from it. She says that I felt so alive in that relationship. I felt like I got in touch with a different part of who I was, a part that was never unfolded, when I was in my parents' home, when I was with my husband. So it has nothing to do with the husband or the child or the parents, but it is about what she's experiencing. It's about getting in touch with that part of herself that she could never get in touch with, Now, this is not to say that you only have to cheat in order to get in touch with that part of yourself that you could never even tap into. But, that becomes the basis of cheating for most part. If, you're finding security in your marriage or in your long-term relationship, and security is something you always wanted. But what we also want is a lot of adventure, where we want our partner to be our confidant. We also want them to be someone who is hard to get. But how can you really have something and yet feel like they're hard to get? So these paradoxical needs, where you want security, but you also want adventure, where you want to have it all completely, have intimacy, but also have a bit of a distance where you feel like, I still don't know this person. Going back to the research that I was talking about, a lot of couples, the most popular answer in that research said that the couples feel the most drawn towards their partners when their partner is away from them. What is it that comes up when their partner is away from them? It's the sense of desire. Desire cannot come from something you already have. Desire always comes from something that you don't have, you know. So how can you have a partner and still not have them? So these paradoxical needs is what leads a person to stick to this relationship that they have, the long term relationship, and yet long for the things that they can't find in this relationship. Of course, there is another side to cheating, which is absolutely different from this aspect, wherein when a person is cheating on their partner, it's a repetitive behavior. And they don't basically believe in the concept of monogamy. They are repeatedly going after other men or women, and they're engaging with them in many ways, sexual, physical, emotional, you know. Now, in this case, perhaps the person doesn't believe in the concept of commitment only, you know, and they're either pretending to do that, or they're forced to do that, or the other person, their partner, is lying to themselves that this person is giving me commitment, you know. So in that case, it's an entirely different story. But the kind of cases that I've worked with, I've seen that the people who cheat are the people who truly, with all their heart, believe in monogamy. They believe in having one person for life. They believe in ending up in a relationship where you can have it all. And yet they end up cheating. You know, it's because there is something, some essence of themselves that was lost when they were in this relationship for such a long time. And this is seen the most in relationships where they are together for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, perhaps, you know, and they won't imagine themselves to be someone who would cheat. They can't think of themselves to be that person, you know. But we think that you know, cheating only comes from the place of getting bored or just having too much of it. But what we don't understand is that it can also come from the place of deprivation and not always abundance. It can also come from the place of everything that you wanted to have in your life, or you didn't even know that you wanted to have it, but that essence can, you, when you start to feel that that part of your relationship or your sense of self cannot be reignited in this relationship, is when you start feeling drawn towards it outside.
Right. But, you know, now that you say it, it makes me think that because, you know, like you said, no relationship is perfect. It's not about partner A, partner B. It's about the relationship, the equation. So since no equation is going to be perfect, and there's always going to be a side of you that is not getting fulfilled in this particular relationship, whatever relationship, do you think that that means that all relationships, everyone who's involved with someone at some point of their life will get that inclination to somehow cheat?
See, so that's the thing. Cheating is one thing that is universally forbidden, and yet it's universally practiced. Right? Everywhere it's happening, millions of people are doing it. It doesn't mean that the entire population has something pathological going on, or the entire population has is coming from the place of deprivation, etc. You know, but that's the thing, that we as humans are curious. We are someone who long for something new. We love to have desire, and yet we are the species who are looking for comfort, security, trust, and belongingness, you know. And like I said, that because of these paradoxical needs, we always we start to think that we can have it from one place and not from, and one thing from one place and the other thing from the other place. But that this is where the answer lies, right? This is where the answer to cheating lies. That, you know, again, going back to Esther Perel, she says that if you bring even 1% of that adventurous side or that thrilling side of yours that you manifest in your affair to your own relationship, to your own marriage, to your own partner, there's so much that you can reignite in that relationship, you know. And this then brings us down to real problems in couples, right? That what is it that you have in a relationship that you don't have in an affair? It is responsibility. It is the burden of what do I expect from you and what do you expect from me, you know? Because here, you have expectations from each other, but it's not the expectations that are the problems. It's the way we are expressing our expectations. B, it's the load of expectations that has come down to this one person only, where what earlier an entire village used to provide, we want all of that now from one person. We have really romanticized and idealized the idea of having a partner, that we want them to be the one. We want them to be our confidant. We want them to be our best partner, our best parent, a parent like image also. We want them to be our guide, our go to people, someone who matches our intellect, someone who is our best friend. We want our partner to be our savior, our rescuer, and we also want them to be someone who is a perpetrator, someone we can put the blame on when we don't want to take responsibility for what we're doing. And this is all of these expectations boiling down to one person. And when they're not fulfilling our expectations, not communicating it, but attacking them, telling them, this is who you are, oh, you always do this, oh, you never give me what I want, oh, you're always becoming this person. We take up their vulnerabilities and we save it to use it against them in their most vulnerable position. And we throw it on their face in a way that makes them feel so attacked that you're no longer their safe space. The thing is that cheating has such taboo and stigma attached to it that it is only about the cheater that we talk about. We only think that is where the problem lies. But that's the thing, that cheating is never about one person in a relationship. Cheating, when it comes to cheating, it's not black and white. It's not right and wrong. It's not perpetrator and victim. It is what the dynamic of the relationship is like. What is it that you're not bringing to the relationship and your partner expects you to? And why is it that you're failing to do so? Now, of course, there are two things at play. One, that you're feeling constantly attacked in this relationship. You're not feeling wanted, perhaps. You're not feeling desired. You feel that it's become all about, like we discussed in our first episode, it is all about for how long have we been together, and not about how are we really spending each of those days, And then from the other person, it's about, are you taking the responsibility of fixing this? Or do you think it's unfixable? Because a lot of couples, when come to this point that they think it's unfixable, is when the entire dynamic changes. When you start to attribute the problems in the relationship to the person's character or personality. So instead of saying that I expect you to communicate in a different manner, you say you are someone who can't communicate right. You're someone who's always going to attack me. You're someone who just will never understand me. So automatically, you're not looking at the problems in the relationship, but you're looking at your partner being the problem. So suddenly, you're on team A and they are on team B. And what really works is when both of you are on the same team and your issues are on the other team, So it's not you versus me. It's us versus our issues. It's us versus our communication. It's us versus our problems. It's us working versus our insecurities, our baggages that we're coming from, our fears, our ego clashes. So when we think that I know that you will not hurt me, I fundamentally know that there is nothing that you would do knowingly to cause me any kind of harm, is when I believe in you, when I believe in us, and I team up with you to sit down on our living room, spread our issues, like a sheet in front of us, and try to understand what is what and where is this coming from, and have a very effective conversation around that. Now, when that doesn't happen, when we think of all of this to be too hard, when we've already given up on the idea of this can get better, then we start to look for that escape elsewhere. Now it's not a very conscious process that I'm going to go out and I'm going to look for adventure because it's missing in my marriage or in my long-term relationship. Not really. It's really about you just suddenly feeling drawn towards something and you would not know why. this in no way means that you're not in your control and you just get drawn towards someone and you just didn't realize when it happened. It's a choice. Cheating is definitely a choice. And while you're feeling that you're feeling more drawn towards your partner, but you want to work out your relationship with your partner is also a choice, you know. So even though you can understand where this behavior of cheating comes from, you can also continue to take responsibility for that behavior. And only then can you heal from cheating as a couple.
Right. But also, I mean, like you said, that cheating is a conscious choice, you know. So even when a relationship is not perfect, both the partners can see outside and they can see perhaps someone or some situation that they are attracted towards. There is always going to be one person who will take that conscious decision of not stepping there, and the other person will. So when we think of that distinction, do you think there is anything that, like, what will determine your choice? What will determine that choice that you make?
So then this is where it comes that, you know, a relationship is not comprised of an individual's efforts. Only one person cannot save a relationship. Whenever I get couples in therapy, they have both come together because one person even has the thoughts, like I said, the sexual imagination or inclination towards a person outside of the relationship, and they're both troubled by it, and both of them walk into therapy together. That in itself is a marker of both of them wanting to save the relationship, you know. And if one person is walking into the relationship, it is a marker of how they are someone who really wants to save the relationship, no matter whether they are the one who's cheated or who's gotten cheated upon. It doesn't matter. So the one who cheated or got cheated upon, it doesn't matter. What matters is that, you know, if both of the people after cheating are ready to work through their issues, and if both of them want to reconcile. But if there is only one person who is feeling either too guilty or is ready to forgive based on if they have cheated or they got cheated upon, then it's going to come to a point where after a point, it's only you who's putting in efforts, you know, and the other person is not reciprocating. So similarly, if you're someone who's continued to put in efforts when you look at the issues in the relationship, but the other person is always looking for an escape, then there is that discrepancy. And you can never ensure if both of us are going to be at the same place. But that is exactly where you need to put in the skills that you have and the will that you have. Sit your partner down and try to have this conversation without having to attack that partner, you know, not looking at them as a culprit, but telling them that, you know, you do this and this is what it does to me. This is what I've been feeling. And this is what I've been expecting from you. So recently I was working with a couple, and the wife tells me that, so we were talking about how can we communicate effectively with each other. And the wife says that, you know, I do communicate. I do it, what you're saying. I communicate. I tell my partner what do I expect from them. And I think they just don't seem to understand what is it that I really want. So I asked them to explain it to me. How do you communicate? So what she told me is that I don't like it when my partner is always using his phone. So I told him, she said it was our anniversary. And every morning he takes his phone and he goes to the bathroom and he comes out after 1 hour, and it's the morning time only that we get to spend together because both of us are working. But he goes to the washroom and I hear the news and everything, and I just feel really irritated. I feel so angry. I feel so news is more important than me. And it's their anniversary, and he comes in and he gets chai for her, and she tells him, "Oh, so you're not watching news today? Dekho kitna acha lag raha hai. Do you think you can do this every day?" And he goes like, haha, why not? And she goes like, I know you won't do it. You know, who are you kidding? And then she goes like, if only our anniversary was every day. And I made her hear herself. And I asked her if you're really expressing your expectations. So there is a difference in complaining and expressing your expectations. There is a difference in saying this is who you are and this is what I want from you. There is a difference in saying that I would like for you to do this for me, and this is what you have been doing. And based on this, I know this is what you will do in the future as well. We're so attuned to talking to each other with this sort of a hostility and contempt, that we're always putting out this idea that either I'm better off, or you have to match up, or you will just never be able to take care of what I expect from you. And we just continue to go down that road. And then there comes a point where when couples walk into therapy, they're like, I cannot talk to her anymore. And she says that, when have you ever talked to me? And he says that I have, but it's like nothing works for you. It's like whatever I do doesn't matter. And both of them are speaking their truths. And yet their scripts are not matching. It's almost like they're talking about two different people, because they're not able to listen to each other. They're not understanding. Whatever one person is saying is not getting through. And it's because of these things. It's because we're always attacking each other. It's because we're not telling this person, when you fight with your partner and you call up a friend and you tell that friend, this is how you're feeling, that is the conversation you need to have with your partner. To your friend, you say, after ranting about your partner for half an hour, you take those last 5 minutes to tell your friend that I feel horrible, I feel so lonely, I really wish that he or she was more available. I wish that things were different. I wish that we could be closer. That is the conversation that you need to have with your partner. That I feel lonely with you. I feel like I don't matter. I wish that you would look at me and spend some time with me. I like your company. And I'd like you to factor me in when you make plans. I think of the times that we have spent together, and I would want to go back to that time. I want to reignite what we have lost. Do you think that we can try that out? And when you go out to try it and one fight happens and you're like, I knew it was never going to happen. What was I even thinking? We can't go back to that time. You've become this surreal person and I've become this bore, and it's just not going to get better. So we're just waiting for, even when we're giving it a try, we're waiting for another hat to drop. We don't really have faith that this will get better, this can get better, and he or she can get better. So we're always approaching the fixing part with contempt. And it's because of that one person is always more involved than the other. It's because you either push them away or you suffocate them so much that there is no room for any further conversation. And this is one side of the story. This is the person who's pushing the partner away, or who's been cheated upon. And the person who is cheating is not taking responsibility. They're going after convenience. They're like, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to do what I can't find. But then again, you can't look at these things as, so it's my fault or it's my fault. It's very contextual. Sometimes the person who cheated wants to have conversation, but it seems like there is no room. It feels like there's nothing that I say gets through. So that's why it comes down to the equation in the relationship more than the two people. What kind of dynamic are you setting because of how you're communicating to each other? And that is going to determine how far is this going to go and whether or not both of you are going to work in this relationship together.
And, what also happens, like when we also put out this question and ask people that what are your questions related to cheating, one of the most common question that we got is that once we get cheated on, there's a lot of trauma that happens. There's a lot of, like you said, that the popular belief is that there was something wrong with me, which is why the partner cheated on me, and all of that. So I do hear you that it's a very gray area, and that there is, you cannot pin the blame on one person, be it the one who cheated or the other one. It's just the whole equation that's a little messed up, So at the same time, then I want to understand from this person's perspective who's just been cheated on. How do they look at the whole act of being cheated on, because they here have kept their side of the bargain and have been at least honest, and the other person hasn't. So how should they look at this kind of picture here?
Okay. So, there is one, how do we look at it? And then there is another thing as how should we look at it? Two very different things. So even though we are now having this conversation and we understand that it's really both the people and it's really the equation and not one person, Having said that, if you're someone who's been cheated upon, you are going to be just in the lowest slumps of your life. It's going to be so hard. It's one of the most painful things to go through. In fact, it's not painful anymore, it's actually traumatic. It's full of self-doubt, and full of, again, like we discussed in the episode where we were talking about breakups, that it just leads to so much of void and emptiness, and you questioning really every part of who you are, your sense of self, and everything that surrounds you and surrounded that person. And again, why is this happening? Again, because you see that earlier relationships or marriages were more of a, an economic arrangement. You want your partner to be loyal to you, so that you know whose children are you bearing, and who your property or all of your lands and cows are going to go to. But now, since our relationships have undergone this whole evolution, relationships or marriage have become more of a romantic arrangement. So earlier, if there was cheating, it was a threat to your economic security. Now it's a threat to your personal security, to your emotional security, which means that if you're looking at your partner as the one, the person who's going to do it all for you, who's going to be everything for you, from your friend to your partner to your parent to your role model to your therapist, not to forget that. And if they are everything for you, then you are also the one. You are the chosen one. If a person is playing so many roles for you, for who are they doing it? For you. And it automatically instills that feeling of, oh, I'm the chosen one. I'm important. I'm special. I'm also the one for them, just like they are the one for me. And infidelity makes you feel that you're not. Infidelity makes you feel that you're not, in fact, the chosen one, that you're one of the ordinary, that someone got so close to you, they learned things about you, and then they didn't like what they saw, and so they left. They heard you, they came to know about you, and then they didn't like the taste of it. So they went to someone else who can be better. This may not truly be the case, but this is how your mind looks at it. This is why when you attach so much sense of self to a particular area of your life, whether that's your relationship, your partner, your children, your career, this is what happens. When you lose it, you lose all of yourself. And I'll tell you what clients who walk in with infidelity, being at the receiving end of infidelity, sound like. They sound just so crushed and so uh, like living dead. They feel that way. They are completely paralyzed by the idea of the fact that their partner has done this to them. They say that, I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew what I was doing in life. I thought I knew where I was going. I thought I was a confident person, and now here I am. I have no idea who am I anymore. There is a major crisis of identity, an entire existential crisis that you start to experience, because there is a loss of meaning that you gave to your life. You were just living your life, going to work, coming back. But it's those little experiences that you shared with your partner that added meaning to all of it. Because that's what it has come down to today. Today we don't want to be as vulnerable to our friends. We don't want to be as vulnerable to our parents. We think they won't understand. But my partner, we don't give them this option only, that you can also not understand. Sometimes you have to. You can't get away with not understanding this. My friends, for once, I'll say, it's okay, she's going through too much of her own, or he's already has too much on his plate, or with my parents, I feel there is a generation gap. But you are the chosen one, my love. So you have to get it all. There is no getting away with, today I don't feel like it, or today I'm not up for it, or I had too much stress at work. I'm going to constantly have expectations from you. And with you going away with my chosen one, and who I was supposed to be a chosen one too, has gone away, I don't feel as important and as validated and as valuable anymore. I feel that it has all come down to, it has all come crumbling down, and I don't know where to begin from now. I don't know how to rebuild now. And it just leaves you crushed. That is what cheating does to you, and this is what you need to do thereafter. This is what you're dealing with. Now, while you're dealing with all of this, none of it matters, if it was the dynamic or if it was the other person or it was me, whatever you're going to do as a part of this aftermath of infidelity or breakup is something that's just going to come out of a place of being uh, just grieving, where you're going to, there are 5 stages of grieving. One of the stages being bargaining, where you just keep bargaining. You can't help but feel, if only I had done this, or if they would have done this, today we wouldn't be here, which is basically nothing but being in a stage where you're not able to understand, where you don't want to understand and accept that this in fact has happened. So that is what infidelity does to a person.
Right. And, from the same perspective, from the same sense of self, like you said, that it just feels so crushed down, that it just feels attacked in a lot of ways. Is it really possible for that person to look at it the way we're talking about it right now, to just see that, okay, maybe let me step back and look at the relationship as a whole. Is it really even possible for them? And if there is something that you'd like to tell them, that them look at it this way.
First of all, healing from cheating is very important before you come to a point where you put it into perspective. You cannot not heal from something and then try to gain perspective. A lot of people ask me this question, and most people after cheating, when they come into therapy, they don't come into therapy because they're not able to recover from it. They come into therapy because now they're not able to trust their new partner, and they always ask this question that I've been cheated upon and now I'm not able to trust again. But that's the thing. If you've just gotten out of a plane crash, you would not ask people around, why am I not able to travel in a plane again? What's happening? It's just going to be very natural for you to feel that sort of a fear, at least for some time, where you won't be able to, and probably forever, and you won't feel that sort of a push or that sort of a compulsion to be able to be okay with flying in the plane, because you understand that this is your trauma. This is what you went through. You had a near-death experience and you've survived it. And it's very understandable if you don't want to go down that road again. However, when it comes to emotional trauma and emotional tension, where the threat is not to life per se, but to our sense of self, we do not give it that much weightage. We downplay it there. But that's the thing, that in order to understand that, okay, I've been in a plane crash, but this is important. I need to travel for my further studies abroad, or for my child's, graduation, or I need to go see this person I'm going to marry, whatever, that will happen only when you've given some due amount of time to your trauma for it to resolve, for it to not trouble you anymore. Similarly, when you're in a relationship, where we're just always in this rush that when can I stop feeling this, and when can I start feeling again those rainbows and unicorns with a new person. But that's not quite how it works. Moving on doesn't mean moving on to another person. These are two very different things. Being able to move on means that you're not in that place anymore where it's still sucking and it still hurts you, and there is this gut-wrenching pain attached to it, that you can stop, where you just can't stop feeling completely overwhelmed by even, listening to their name or something, So moving on effectively does not mean that you stop talking about that experience, or you just don't allow your friends to mention that person anymore. That is not what it looks like. So moving on has to be done in order to come to a point where you are able to understand what went wrong there. And this is, for most part, the part of recovery, where first you deal with the emotions that are resulting from being cheated upon. And then you come to a point where you're like, okay, let me now put 2 and 2 together. Let me understand what went wrong, so that I don't take this kind of baggage into my new relationship. But this understanding that we're talking about, this dynamic that we're talking about, is not for people who've just been cheated upon and have gotten out of a relationship. This is for people who are trying to work it out, a couple who's trying to recover from cheating. Because I do get asked this question a lot. Can one recover from cheating? Of course one can. A couple definitely can if they're both willing to go down that road. If they're willing to work through their struggles. Because again, another paradoxical need here, that I feel that in order for me to be happy in this relationship, I want my partner to give me fidelity. I want them to be loyal. I want them to commit. But at the same time, I feel that I'm entitled to pursuing wherever I get my happiness from. So if I'm not getting it from this relationship, I can pursue another person. So this is so ironic that you want your partner to be giving you fidelity, but you feel that I'm entitled to go where my heart takes me. Again, another clash of thoughts. So if both of you are in a position where you want to work it out, even though you're hurting, you're really hurting very badly, but you wish that if this wasn't the equation, and if you could work this out, then there is a way out. And I have at least learned, looking at my clients and in my practice, that there are always two sides to cheating. One side where there is betrayal, where there is blame, where there is pain, there is hurt, and another side where there is opportunity, where there is an opportunity where you can rekindle everything that you've lost. Because we've seen it, that it is when couples have almost lost each other and then they've come back together, is when a partner confronts the other partner that I think you're cheating on me, or one partner confesses that I cheated on you, I did this to you. That is where, for the first time, partners sit down to have honest conversations also. So if infidelity is the place of just heartbreaks and the most horrible feelings that you can feel, then it is also a place of, it can become an opportunity. I mean, this is not to say that it's like saying that, I would advise cancer. I would never advise cancer, but we have seen people who have survived cancer to have their perspectives changed completely, and they started to look at their life in a more valuable light, and it just gives them a new perspective, and there is their life before that diagnosis and their life after it. And that can be looked at as an opportunity in a relationship as well, where you are giving each other that opportunity that we can heal from this breakup, and then you're coming to a point where you're sitting down and you're having very honest conversations. So instead of asking your partner when you're trying to heal, this is where I'm talking about a couple trying to heal from cheating. So instead of asking them the discrete details of the cheating, where you ask them, how was she? Was he better than me? Was she better than me? Were they better in bed? How far did you go? How many times did it happen? What was the experience like? Is she hotter than me? Is he smarter than me? You have to hold on to your curiosity of asking these questions, because they're only going to give you more hurt and pain. Instead, ask questions that can bring you back to each other. Ask them, what is it that was missing in our relationship that drew you towards that person? How did that person make you feel about yourself? What is it that you felt over there that you could not feel in your life before? What do you think you always wanted in a relationship, but it's not there? These are the questions that are real questions that you want to inquire. So instead of, interrogating, sit down and introspect together. And these are the questions that you want to ask. And this is also how you want to express that how I felt when you left me, how I felt when you chose another man or woman over me. What did it do to me to see that you don't want me as much as you want this other person, that the desire in our relationship is dying out? And if you start to have these conversations with your partner, there is definitely a huge chance of both of you coming to a point where you can recover from these breakups.
So, Praneeth, like you said, there are two ways to look at it, betrayal and an opportunity, which again brings me to the question that, do you think people should actually forgive the other person and give it a second chance? Does that work according to you?
Right. Again, no universal answer to that question. You have to take into consideration where both of you are at when this happened. So one thing that's, I think, primary to whether or not you want to give a second chance to your partner is the fact that, um, is the other person really guilty? Like I said, that breakups, because they are now a threat to your emotional security, they attack your sense of self and give you an identity crisis when it happens. And that is why it is traumatic. And what happened? Okay. And that is why it is traumatic and not just painful. And what do we know about trauma? We know about trauma that it starts to dissolve when you start to heal from your trauma only when the perpetrator takes responsibility of their behavior, and when they acknowledge your pain. So in this case, if the person who's cheated upon you, who cheated on you, is taking responsibility for what they've done, if they are guilty or not, that has to be factored in to understand whether or not you want to give this person a second chance. You have to see if they're even asking for a second chance, or if you're someone who's just so desperate to save this relationship, even if there is no one on the other side to save it with you. You're just alone. You're trying to pull a log all by yourself. There's no one to pick it up from the other end. At the end of it, you're going to be exhausted. You're going to be more lonely, and you're going to feel like this always happens to me. I always end up in a place where I am giving my everything and I'm not receiving it. So you want to check if they're really guilty, because in most cases, what happens is that people are guilty for hurting their partner, but they're not guilty for the act. They're not guilty for cheating on them. So that has to be factored in. We first need to see, where is the apology coming from? Is it coming from genuine guilt, genuine regret, or is it coming from the place of, now that you have found out, there's nothing else for me to do but to accept it? Now that you have, or there is a trace where that my partner can find out through this trace, so might as well just go and talk to them, etc. So if it's not coming from the place of guilt and regret, then you might want to think, what is it that you're trying to save? Is there anything to be saved even, or not?
But also, Praneeth, do you think, and I do think that this happens with a lot of people, that, okay, once the forgiveness has happened, the second chance has happened, it's going well. But next time, the person who has been cheated on makes a mistake. They just simply say, okay, I forgave you for that time. So this is, we're equal, So that kind of dent always stays. I want to know, do you think that always stays, or if there is a way to sort of just erase that from their history? And B, how does this behavior work of always just, putting the ball on the other side? Okay, now you made that mistake. Now I'm allowed to make one mistake.
Wonderful question. This is something that we see happening all the time in relationships, because, whenever partners get back together or reconcile after cheating, like I said, that you've reconciled, but the one who cheated is or never was really guilty. And the one who forgave you did not really forgive you. Now what's happening is, now we're keeping scores, right? Like I said, that one person is on team A, one person is on team B. So if one of the persons has felt really hurt and they felt like, how can I be cheated upon? Then it's just going to turn into a game. Now I want you to stay, not because I want to work this out with you, but so I can show you that I can also, have what you've had. And I can also make you feel the way you made me feel. And you're not the one who's superior, etc. But I can also be in this position. We can find someone outside and who can have a life outside. So what's happening is that we're not understanding the sensitivity of the equation, and we definitely don't want to work the relationship out. We want to save our ego. We want to save our sense of self. That is very deeply attached to someone liking me. And if they've cheated upon me, we get hurt in two ways. Different kinds of people get hurt in these two ways. One kind of people who have a very made up sense of self in their head. People we know as people with superiority complex, which is basically inferiority complex in disguise. So when they get cheated upon, they reach a place where they feel that they're not concerned about I got cheated upon. They're concerned about I got cheated upon by them. how can I get cheated upon? You know the difference, right? So I cannot bear that you can choose someone else over me. The sense of rejection is actually making me feel very insecure about myself. But to protect that sense of self that I have built of myself in my own head because of that superiority makes me feel not rejected. I'm not going to come to terms with the rejection, but I'm going to look at it as a competition. I'm going to take it up as a challenge and as a fight where, okay, this was, uh, your act. Now I'm going to show you my act. And we're just going to keep, picking up fights so that I can manage to score better than you. Now I want you to stay so that now you watch me talk to other men or women and you don't have the nerve to tell me that what are you doing? Because you've done it in the past. And they do it. The moment the other partner points it out that, what are you doing? Why are you flirting with this man or woman? They're like, you have no right to say this to me, which means that this is yet another way of cheating. We don't just cheat with our partners when there is a third person involved. We also cheat our partner with contempt. We also cheat them with indifference. We also cheat them with using their vulnerabilities against them, with violence, with these hostile comments and conversations. What about that? We never talk about that part of the cheating. Because when you are indifferent towards your partner's feelings, or you're showing contempt where you feel that you're superior to them, how are they essentially feeling? They're feeling abandoned. And this is exactly how you feel when you get cheated upon. You feel abandoned, So you don't necessarily always need another person in the picture to be able to feel that you got cheated upon. Sometimes your partner can do that by just, not choosing you and choosing themselves and their ego or their pseudo sense of self that they're holding up. So this is one way that people deal with breakup, that they then start using it against this other person's personality and they start attacking them with that thing. So how does the second person deal with this infidelity or cheating is that they start to take everything very personally. So even if they've forgiven this person, they will constantly keep feeling this is again where my partner is abandoning me. Again, if I say something, my partner won't like it. So they stop being their authentic self and they start becoming too complying, too, like a doormat, and they want to do everything according to the other person because they're now filled with this fear of being abandoned by this other person. So whatever the equation is, whoever you are out of these two people, the answer is similar for both of you, that you need to detach your sense of self from this one person. Because as long as that is happening, you're going to continue to feel threatened even after reconciling. And you may attack them back if you're threatened, or you may continuously take things personally when you're threatened. Anyway, you will try to shield yourself, and it's not going to bring back the health into the relationship. In fact, it's going to make matters worse. And this is the equation where people then stop. It doesn't work out even after they reconciled after cheating. And now cheating is not really the reason anymore that you won't end up together. It's all these other issues that come in because of that. So here's what you need to do. Like I said, that the answer is common for both of these people. Both of these people need to take their eggs out from that one basket that they've put all of them in. And they want to put it in different baskets. They want to gain their sense of self from different areas of their life as well. They want to now, get in touch with all the areas of their life that they were not able to get in touch with because of being with this person. So invest in your friends, invest in your hobbies, invest in your work, invest in your parents. Get in touch with those aspects of yourself that does not involve this one person, that does not have your partner in it with you. But that's the thing that, like I said, that we want this one person to become our everything. The answer is also in this statement, that we can have this person just be our partner, and we can take out the therapist, the confidant, the best friend, and the parent, and we can find it elsewhere. And we can go back to allowing a community provide to us and not just one person provide to us what an entire community used to provide. And that is the answer, that we need to be able to draw our sense of self from a whole holistic view.
Yeah, and when I also hear this, it's like an interesting thought that comes to me that says that, okay, if before you got cheated on, you made this person the center of your universe, all your needs you were deriving from them, then you get cheated on, and then now you decide, okay, let me just spread my sense of self and try to also interact with other things. But then, how is that healing going to happen in that relationship? How will that relationship ever feel like home? Because there is always going to be that comparison, right? That is point se pehle we were this couple, but now we are this couple who is also dividing our time with other things, who's dividing our heart with other things. So, do you think this? Then, by this logic, do you think that healing as an individual, maybe yeah, but as a couple, does it ever really happen? Do they ever get to how they were?
Right. Maybe, Isha, the idea is that you don't get back to how you were. Maybe the idea is that you shouldn't get back to how you were. Because isn't it that was the problem? That because your equation had so much tension is why you both came to a point where you started to withdraw from each other. So the idea is not to go back to the same old pattern so that you can feel at home, but to let go of those patterns that felt like home, that just because they were familiar, but truly, in the true sense, they were toxic, they were unhealthy. Letting go of that and rebuilding a new home together. Why is it that we've glorified the idea of doing everything together and only then feeling like I truly belong with you? Why is it that I can't do my work, meet my friends, just have a Friday evening with only my girlfriends, have a Saturday night only with my, guy friends, my boyfriends, and come back to my partner on a different day on the weekend, and yet feel at home with them? In fact, that's what we're trying to understand here, that we have to allow ourselves and our partners and our relationships to give us all of these things that we want. All of these paradoxical needs will be met only when you have security and at the same time you have your own individual sense of self, where you can then rekindle that desire. Like we discussed in the beginning of this episode, that you cannot want what you already have. Now, in order to want it, you need to have certain areas in life where you're not always with each other. So the research that I was talking about, where the couples were asked, when is it that you feel the most drawn towards your partner? The first popular answer was when my partner is away. The second popular answer was when my partner is out there doing their own thing, when they're in their element. And when I look at them, when I look at my partner giving that presentation, when I look at my partner on TV doing anchoring, when I look at my partner in their arena, sitting on their laptop late night, working and just looking so focused, sipping on their coffee, how mundane or monotonous it may look. But they say that when we look at our partners in their area of life where I'm not with them, I feel really, truly, drawn towards them. Looking at my partner being passionate about something else other than me makes me drawn towards them. Of course, except that the other thing should not be another person. Then it doesn't make you feel drawn towards, them. But, when that happens, you feel drawn towards them. Why? Because in that moment, you have this sense that I don't know who this person is. I can't capture this part of them. This is not who my partner is. They just feel so alien, so different, so distant in that moment. When you look at them in their element, when you look at them at doing what they're passionate about, so this is the moment where you feel really drawn towards your partner. All the couples listening to us right now, they can relate to it. I'm sure that when they see their partner doing their own thing, you're so away from them, you're not there with them, but it just makes you want to have them even more. And all the couples who are not able to relate to it, it means that you've given everything to each other and you don't have passions outside of relationships, outside of this relationship. And that is what the problem is. What you already have, you would not want it because you already have it. And what you don't want, you don't desire for it. Like for you to desire for something, you need to have that wish, that want towards them. So how can you have it in a relationship where you already have commitment, already have loyalty, that you have your own areas of your life, and then when you come back to each other, you feel more at home. So this idea that is glorified so much of doing everything together and becoming a couple and just living through each moment together, just doing all of it together, from morning walks to late night parties to work to going for birthdays, weddings, and mixing groups and all of that. As fun as this is, and as amazing as it is to have your friends meet your partner and vice versa, just save some parts of you only for yourself also. Save certain areas of yourself only for yourself, and let that trust, that desire grow. And then when you come back to each other, it'll really be like coming back to each other. Staying together is not as desirable as coming back to each other. And that is the essence that's missing in our relationships today.
That makes a lot of sense to me. But again, it's so easy to learn certain behaviors, but it's so difficult to unlearn them. Now that because we've already glorified that one person as everything, wala behavior, how does one, because now I'm sure that people hearing this understand the logic, understand where you're coming from. But when it comes to practice, unlearning is just so difficult. So what do you have to say about that?
Right. So humans remember things because of the neural connections that get formed. You practice something repeatedly, that neural connection gets more deeply traced in your brain, right? So it's simple that when you keep walking down a path, which if you're walking in a park and there is no there's grass all over, but you keep walking down this one path, this one particular area, you'll see that eventually the grass will start to die out in that particular area. And eventually there will be no grass at all. And automatically there will be a path paved, right? And then eventually everyone is going to walk up and down that path. And it's actually going to be like it's a paved path, but not really. You just kept walking there time and again, and it got cleared out. So this is kind of like how these traces are built in our brain. And this is how we remember things, and they become such strong patterns, right? And now, if we want this path to be dissolved, and if we want grass to grow back there, what will we do? We'll stop walking down that path, and we'll wait for, we'll probably restrict the area, and eventually the grass will start to grow back. And before you know it, it's just going to be the same, Of course, it's going to take its own time. The process, it's very slow, very steady, but it can go back to being exactly the way it was. Or you can also plant something new in there, while the grass has been cleaned away, and you can, grow some flowers over there. That can also be done. So that's exactly how you treat your brain. When you're trying to unlearn something, you have to stop practicing what you have already been practicing, because you can't say, I want to unlearn this pattern while you're still practicing it every day. So there has to be a withdrawal in how have I lived with my partner so far. And now again, that withdrawal doesn't have to come right away, right? Otherwise it's going to have its own withdrawal symptoms. You have to first begin with a very small step, baby steps. The first step being just noticing how all the areas of your life are dominated by your partner. Just start to notice that, start to bring that to your conscious attention, and at least get in touch with the gravity of the situation. So notice how your patterns are just repeating themselves. Notice how you want your partner to be in all the areas of your life. Notice the gravity of the situation, and notice how you feel when your partner is not there with a particular moment or in a particular scenario or for a particular event. Do you feel less confident? Do you feel invalidated? Do you feel there is no one to sort of push you and tell you that you can? Even though it's you only who's going to end up doing it, but you sort of want someone to have faith in you. Recognize what is it that your partner gives you, and then get in touch with that part of yourself. Why is it that I need that validation from my partner? Why is it that I need them to pat my back? Why is it that I feel more confident only when they are standing next to me? You know, what is it that I'm not able to get from myself, from within myself, and that I'm trying to compensate with my partner? So, in order to heal from it individually, you have to get in touch with your individual scripts. Is it coming from a place where you have been deprived of all the validation and faith in you, growing up? Is it because your emotions have always been dismissed and now you have lost all faith? You feel like what you're thinking is wrong. You can't trust your decision making. So now you want someone else to make decisions for you, and that someone else has become your partner. Are you someone who's scared of taking responsibility, so you always drag your partner along so that if something goes wrong, you can simply put the blame on them and rid yourself of the responsibility? So get in touch with, there's always going to be a reason why you can't do it without your partner. And that is where your self introspection, self work begins. So the ultimate goal is to stop practicing that and practicing a new pattern where you're doing something new without your partner. Just, you're going to have to start it with that sense of awkwardness. You're not going to be first all right with it and then get into it. Get into it with that awkwardness. Get into it with that underconfidence. Get into it with that anxiety and that fear of uncertainty. And then see what it does to you. See what it feels like. But again, baby steps. The first step is to notice it. The second step is to understand what is it that's stopping you, getting in touch with that. And then maybe third is to actually trying it out. Let this be a very personal and very introspective process.
Right. So all of that is something that people who've given their relationship a second chance can go ahead with. But what about people who've cut that off, who've broken up? And now for them, the challenge is to sort of recover from the damage that has been done. Like you said, that a lot of times vulnerabilities get played on, and that's when you just start to question yourself. So how do they heal from whatever has just happened? I'm just talking specifically about people who've ended it.
So again, like we did discuss a couple of questions before, that you're going to have to deal with the massive sense of loss and meaninglessness that has come in because of the infidelity that led to breakup. You're going to have to get in touch with all the experiences that you have had before that involved some kind of betrayal, some kind of cheating, and see if your mind is connecting this to that. If you got cheated upon by your boyfriend, see if you saw your father also cheating upon your mother, and see if you're connecting that narrative to that, and get in touch with whether or not you're generalizing this. Because the moment you generalize it, that all men are like that, or all women are like that, or it always happens to me, or I don't deserve love, or it's just not going to work for me, or everyone's going to leave everyone eventually. If that sort of a narrative is coming in, that it means that you're somehow generalizing your experiences because you've seen it a lot, right? So after you have, like I said, sat down with your emotions, and there's no okay, 2 days I have sat down with my emotions, now let me switch to the next step. There is no chronology to it, and it's not structured. When it comes to emotions, it's messy, it's chaotic, and there is no structure whatsoever. So when you're in a place where you don't feel as overwhelmed, let that be the marker, where you have cried and you have grieved for what you've lost, and you have done all the bargaining, and you have been enough, angry, and now you're somewhat coming close to acceptance. Then sit down, and like we discussed, it's important to give everything a perspective, to understand what went wrong where, how did I contribute to this equation, where was my partner at, what is it that they did, what led to this whole mess up in our relationship. It's very important to understand what worked in your life and what did not work in your life, in order to understand where you stand and where you fall, and then what your future will look like. And until unless that is not put into perspective, you're going to draw from it a lot of irrational belief systems, generalization being one of them. It's an irrational way of thinking, that you take up one experience and you ascribe it to all the entire population, all the experiences to come in your life. So that is one, attending your emotions. Second is putting things into perspective, understanding what's happening. Third is to again get in touch with yourself. Again, look at yourself just like you do in a relationship where you're trying to reconcile. This is also another relationship in which you're trying to reconcile. You're trying to reconcile with yourself. You're trying to rekindle what you've lost, and you're trying to build a relationship back with yourself where you don't feel as hollow. So here, all the more you need to explore everything that you did not get a chance to explore while you were with this person. And this does not always have to be wild things that now I'm going to go on a having sex with everyone in the world spree, or all of these things. These lists we find online very easily. What we don't find is, how do I get in touch with that one area of my life that I always wanted to do, but I just never did it. Perhaps my partner was very condescending, very patronizing, and they always made me feel that you're just good for nothing. But can I get in touch with that part of myself that has internalized that shame, and that became my inner voice, and how now that inner voice is stopping me from experiencing who am I, or who am I capable of being? Can I give perspective to that voice and call it what it is, shame, inner critic, and not look at it or look at that voice as a factual thing? And can I then proceed to just trying new things, or go back to the things that I used to do when I was a child? Can I pick up those crayons again? Can I go back to dancing again? Can I go back to singing again before I was told by my partner that you suck at it? Yeah, so, just getting in touch with those parts of yourself that you lost, getting in touch with those friends that you lost, having very honest conversations with people around you and telling them what is it that you expect from them, what kind of support is it that you need. And do not think that a lost partner can only be compensated with another new partner. That loss can only be fixed with someone else coming in the picture in the same capacity. Now, it doesn't have to be the case. Like I said, moving on doesn't have to be moving on to another person. It can also be looking within and getting in touch with yourself. It can also be developing a very strong support system that is comprised of friends and family. It can also be your hobbies. It can be so liberating sometimes. My clients share that experience with me, and it's beautiful to see how cheating can always work as an opportunity as well, to go back to your partner or to yourself perhaps, and give another chance to that relationship.
Right. And now I'm just going to take up a few questions that people from our community has sent us. One of the questions here that says that there is this feeling that why didn't you tell me instead, and why did you have to lie and cheat? You could have just walked out instead. So this thing about, how people understand that it's okay to either fall out of love and all of that, but still they've not been honest too, they've not been told the truth too. So how do they sort of, how does this play out?
Right. So, they did not tell and leave because they probably never wanted to leave. If they wanted to leave, they would have broken up or they would have divorced you. But the fact that they did not tell you is because they want you to be there, but they're also in touch with what is it that they're not able to have with you. What is it? Like I said, that if someone has cheated on you, it's not because they didn't want to be with you. It's because they wanted to be in touch with another part of themselves that was perhaps missing in this relationship, right? So when you ask this question that you could have told me and you could have been honest, it's coming from a place where you cannot stand feeling rejected. But truth be told, even if you are told this, even if your partner is honest to you, you are going to feel as rejected. You are still going to have that sort of an attack coming towards your emotional security, and you are going to feel extremely threatened. And even this is going to lead to identity crisis. And of course, but this definitely opens up more avenues of the relationship working out, because if you've managed to reach in that headspace where you're like, at least you were honest. This makes me feel that you acknowledge your cheating as a mistake and that you're guilty about it and that you want to work this out. you know, or you're not able to live with that guilt because that's, you know, that that's not who you are. So this gives an opportunity. But if the person's not telling you that, then it shows that they don't want to break up with you. Now, there can be many reasons for that. One, maybe because they're just acting out of convenience, where they want to keep you also. You know, they want there to be a secure place as well, but at the same time, they want to get in touch with something that they can't have with you, you know. Or this can come from a place where like we discussed today in the entire segment, that it is a part of ourselves that we're looking at. We don't want to hurt our partners. We don't want to let go of what we have. And that's why we did not say anything, you know. Not to say that it's justifiable, it's right to do that, but just to understand what kind of headspace is the person in. But I suppose that when a person says that, why would you not tell me and just leave? It's not coming from the place of genuinely asking their partner to tell me. It's coming from the place of, but why would you keep me in this darkness for so long? Why would, you know, this feeling, that suddenly this realization that you get that I don't know who I was with. That's how my clients talk. They say that I thought I knew this person and now I just don't know anymore. I don't know who I was with. I can't even imagine him or her doing something like this to me. I never thought this would happen to me. So it's that shock. It's that place of feeling absolutely rejected and feeling also this sense of a lot of my clients say that I just feel so stupid that I didn't read the signs, you know. So it's coming from the place of shaming yourself, because today the shame is not in leaving anymore. Today the shame is in staying in toxic relationship. Today people tell you, why would you stay in a relationship like this? Walk out of it. So they shame you because of that. So it's that shame that you kill yourself with also. And that is why you ask the partner or the therapist that, you know, why would they not tell me? Why would they just lie about it?
Right. And Praneet, just before we close, because I feel like today's discussion definitely has been about cheating, but it's just opened up a lot of new insights about how you look at a relationship in general, that whole don't put your eggs in one basket concept. So I'm sure it's like for any viewer right now, it might be a little too much to comprehend. So what is your last word to them? Anything that you'd like to leave them with based on our conversations today?
Right. I just want to conclude on the note that all these years, for decades now, we have looked at cheating as a sin. And as true as that can be, in for some couples, in most cases, perhaps, it's not making the situation any better. It's not helping us reconcile with our partners or with ourselves. So I want to submit to you this, that where cheating is about betrayal and heartbreak, it can also be a place of opportunity. It can also be an opportunity where you can look at this as a pause, where when you then come back and you resume, you bring in new energies and you bring in new perspectives to offer to each other, new ways of communicating to each other, and new ways of being vulnerable together. In our lifetime, we're going to have multiple relationships, and so is the world like today, for millennials and for generations to come. We're going to have a lot of relationships, but it's really upon us to decide if we want to have it with the same person. So you can have new relationships with the same person as well. And if you want to reconcile after cheating, that moment, that incidents in your relationship can offer as a new opportunity to begin a new relationship with the same person or with yourself, of course.
Right. And with that, we come to a close for today's episode. And to anyone listening this, I know there can be a lot of differing views. You can feel a certain way, but do let us know what you thought about the episode. Write to us, write down in the comments below. And yeah, we'll see you next week with another episode. And till then, keep pouring your heart out.